Hello and welcome to episode 92 of the Rollo and Slappy Show. Today is May 21st, 2018. I am Rollo McFlugel, and with me is Slappy Jones 2, and we are both of McFlugel.com. The show notes page for this episode is McFlugel.com/92. We'll be able to find the link of what we're talking about, as well as check out our sponsors, which is also us, but LibertyMugs.com. So go check it out. Buy some mugs. We've got a lot of Brainlet Wojak themed mugs there. So we get some good Liberty messages, but also usually try to make them kind of funny. So check it out, share it, and use the hashtag Liberty Mugshots when you take a picture of it and post it on social media so we can see it and share it with everybody else. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Slappy, and he's going to introduce our episode topic.
Thanks, Rollo. Welcome, everyone, to the Rollo and Slappy Show. Today's episode, we're going to take on Jordan Peterson again. Or maybe. We're at least going to discuss one of the things, one of his videos that he has out. We talked about him in a previous episode where he was clearly clueless on the ideas of anarcho-capitalism, for sure. But he's not a political philosopher, so I guess that's fine. But we thought we needed to address it. And this is another one that Rollo sent me a link to this earlier in the week. It's titled 12 Principles for a 21st Century Conservatism. And wanted to talk about it. So, Rollo, your initial thoughts or your thoughts? Let's talk through this. I have some things to say as well.
He's a racist misogynist.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
We'll catch you next week. Yeah, it's funny. He came in the news recently because there was it the New York Times had an article?
Yes, they did.
About the patriarchy or something.
Yeah, that's why. Okay, I was wondering why this came up. There was something about that.
When I came across this tweet of these 12 principles of him, I thought it was like very recent until I was trying to find the tweet again. And he tweeted it out on, I think, April 24th. So I think this talk was from a while ago that he gave. And we'll have this...
Oh, yeah. Well, the talk on you was linked on YouTube, and it says 6/15/2017. So last summer.
Oh, so it's that old. Okay.
Yeah, it's old news, dude.
We should probably talk about something else then.
Although this
something more current.
Yeah, no, 6/22. Yeah.
No, but it's
good to know the co-host preps.
Yeah, well, I actually did watch it.
Yeah, so did I.
I didn't. When I sent it to you, I didn't realize that the link that he linked to an entire speech. I just thought he had put up 12 principles of conservatism.
So you must have been confused, and I was like, "Did you listen?"
Yeah.
To listen to what? I don't know the link you sent me.
But he catches, obviously the guy catches, and we said this in the last episode. The guy catches so much flack from the left, and it's stupid what they criticize him for. I mean, you listen to him talk. He's like anybody else of that kind of social conservative outlook, that he's not a sexist. He's not a racist. He's the complete opposite of those things. And some people might be saying, and I think overall he's a very good person for the world. He pushes back against the, clearly just vicious and nasty agenda of a lot of the radical left. And that's good, and that's important. And so a lot of people might be saying, oh, why are you taking time to criticize him? And this episode isn't going to be all criticism of him. We're going to go through the points and say where we agree and disagree. But I think it's important because, I mean, our audience is not just... our audience is fairly libertarian, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's important that when someone does come out, because the left is normally seen as the huge enemy of us. And we got to be careful that we don't fall into the trap of just reactionaryism. And not saying that Jordan Peterson is your normal reactionary, or that he is a reactionary.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know that I would say
he's not.
I mean, he's got a long history of talking and stuff. He's only gotten popular in the last couple of years.
Right. He's not, but in more of a casual definition of the reactionaryism, that it's just anything anti-left, or anyone who pushes back against the left is like, let's follow everything, because he's...
Well, like the New York Times did, you can take any of his quotes. I mean, you could go through here and pick out quotes out of context and try to make him look bad.
Mm-hmm.
Or try to use his quotes to further your reactionaryism or whatever.
Right.
You know, without listening to everything of what he's saying and getting the full context of the quote.
Yeah. So I think it's important that while we, praise him for anything good that he says, to also, if he's wrong, he's wrong. He's a psychologist. He's not a political philosopher. So
right. And
even if he were a political,
remember when you listen to him.
Right. And
yeah, go ahead.
Even if he were a political philosopher, you can obviously disagree with him, but it's different. I mean, he's not in his wheelhouse when he's talking about this as much. So I think he's more open for error, to put it bluntly. So I recommend going through and I know before I watched, because I read a couple. I didn't even read that whole article that got put out recently that everyone was flipping out about. I read a couple lines of it, which. In this talk clears it up a little bit from what I read, maybe. And even just reading his 12 points, there's some things we're reading like, when he talks about it, obviously, you can spend more time than just one line. He can explain what he means.
Context to it.
It makes it a little better. Sometimes it makes it a little bit worse. So I guess without any further ado, you want to get into it?
Yeah, let's do it. I don't have the list, though, in front of me. I just have the YouTube video. So
I have the list.
Wait, maybe it says it down here. Okay.
Yep.
I never mind. I see it. I take that back. So do you want to go through each point?
Yeah, there's some that we can combine because I think in the video he doesn't explicitly talk about a few of them, or he kind of combines some in one talking point.
All right. Well, the first one, the fundamental assumptions of Western civilization are valid.
Sure. That's tough because it depends on really what you mean. And I think when he actually explains it, he kind of is correct and incorrect at the same time. I think a lot of Western ideas are good. I mean, if you want to say that, property rights or whatever, and I don't even know that that's true, but the whole, the last couple centuries, a lot of good things came out of the West. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But he kind of puts it in a weird framing where he says, well, everyone wants to come here. So therefore, that's proof that the West is I don't know if we're going to say superior, but there's something very good going on about the West. And that's true. A lot of people have emigrated to the West over time. But he's ignoring a big piece of why people are moving here, and that is because the West is bombing them. Right. And so they've got no home anymore. So it's kind of, you can't ignore that aspect of it.
Now I will say something, which I totally agree. I don't think we'd have these like refugee problems, quotes, whatever. There's some problems with the refugees. I don't think we'd have them if we weren't destroying Iraq and Syria and the whole Middle East. But I do find it interesting that, let's say like Canada or pick a country started attacking the United States. I find it interesting that people want to leave here and go to the place that's bombing them. So I kind of think that does say something positive for Western civilization.
The people, yeah.
The people. That's what I mean, the culture, the people.
Right. Absolutely.
Willing to move to the place where the government is bombing them. It says something. I think there's something there that would be good, at least to the people who decide to come here. Right. Now, I don't know the refugee situation. Do they go to camps and then they're shipped out like against their will and placed in the West? I don't know. I don't think that's the case, but it could be. I don't know.
But the problem is, I agree with what you just said, absolutely. But the problem is that Peterson also is saying that the governments of the West are part of that.
And that there's clearly,
right.
Sure.
And that's one of my bigger issues is that he kind of, I'll call it naively, thinks about the state.
Well, yeah, and that's something I was thinking as I was listening to this, because one, he's talking to conservatives and he says like how conservatism can. What am I trying to say? Like he's talking to conservatives and saying how you can be conservative and do it. Well, I don't think abolishing the state is conservative.
Right.
Would you say it is?
No.
I don't think it would be. So, although we talked about this in the past, he's clearly has no clue. He's never looked into it or thought about not having a state. And I guess as like Michael Huemer would say, we have the burden of proof there. It's okay to accept it because it's always been around. Is that the right way to put it?
Yeah, but you're jumping the gun.
Right.
Because he talks about this point.
When?
Point.
Maybe I missed it. We'll get to it.
Yeah,
All right, forget it. All right, we'll just move on then.
No, I just want
I mean, generally, I like Western civilization.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's kind of what I want to say. So I don't want to I don't want to trash it too bad. Of course, anyone who's listened to this knows what we think about Western governments.
Right. It's some of the products aren't all that great, and it's important to separate just the culture itself and some of the products like the state.
Right.
Or just to say, and sure. I don't know, and Peterson's clearly not saying that every product of the West is good.
Right.
But one of the things he is saying is good. The state clearly isn't.
I would agree.
And so, because one of the ironic things is that he said, like, is the kind of ridiculous vitriolic left part of the West, and is it a product of the West?
I would say yes.
Right. And so they're like the people really are making these laws. They're in the state. They're the ones in control of the power. The product of the West are the ones that are trying to destroy him. It's kind of, I guess I just like hear him flesh that out a little bit.
Yeah, do they make a distinction? Because just because it happens in the West, does that make it Western civilization? Or does Western civilization specifically mean like Judeo-Christian values? I don't know.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if that's the case. Because if it's anything that happens in the West, well, yeah. But if it's a fight back against...
I don't know where that, like, the left of today would come from, though, if not from the West. Certainly not. I
agree. I'm just trying to, I don't know, maybe give him some benefit of the doubt, because I agree with what you're saying. They grew up in the United States. They go to United States schools. It's all it came out of Western culture somehow, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not like it's not like the Asians came and like dropped some culture on us, and now we have this Eastern culture. I don't know.
Right. And I think the bigger point that I would like to ask him is, like, I know he says 21st century conservatism, mm-hmm. but what is, like, the West didn't develop in the 21st century. It developed a long time before that. So, like, the West has had its problem. Like, Europe had major issues. Like, so... because he brought up when he said that people are moving to the West. Well, what about a country like Italy in the beginning of the 20th century? There was massive migration out of Italy. That certainly had Judeo-Christian influences. I mean, Vatican City is within the country.
Fascism, which, Jordan Peterson would not be a fascist, right?
Right.
I don't know how you could argue that didn't come out of the West.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's Italy and Germany, right?
Yep. And the U.S.
And the U.S.
For a long time.
Yeah.
So, okay. I don't want to... I think we can move on.
We don't need to hash on,
Yeah.
Number 2, peaceful social being is preferable to isolation and to war. In consequence, it justly and rightly demands some sacrifice of individual impulse and idiosyncrasy.
So, as long as you're not talking about making those sacrifices in the name of the state, then I'm...
or the greater good or whatever.
Right. I'm fine with that. I mean, when he fleshed it out when he was talking about it, he was saying that, like, you can't just, like, punch people in the face because that's how you feel. Like, you have to pull back that kind of thing.
And that's another thing what I was trying to get to in the beginning when he's not a political philosopher. He's like a self-help guy. He's a clinical psychologist.
Right.
So if he's talking to an individual and he's like, yeah, I know you want to do these things. I know you get angry and you want to punch the guy, but in order to like fit into society, you got to repress those impulses. I think that's kind of important to realize that he's talking, I think, or maybe he's taking these theories and applying them to governance. But I think he's more talking about on a personal level. If you want to fit in and get ahead in society, you got to kind of be what he said, normal. And he did even say being normal isn't the highest virtue. It might not even be a high virtue, I think he says.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to in order to get along. So if your goal is to be the CEO of a company, yeah, you should probably kind of blend in a little bit. Of course, work hard and be smart. It were two other things he talked about.
Right.
And when he talked about isolation, he said, like, you could live in a bush, but you'll starve to death.
Mm-hmm.
So if he meant like literal isolation from not seeing people or working or getting food or getting along or having any voluntary interactions or interactions, period, yeah, I would say isolation would be a problem. Like if all you do is sit in the basement and never talk to anyone, that can't be good for personal development.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with him. The only thing that's confusing, and not about what he's saying here, is just in the beginning of his talk, he said, like, I'm not saying this to be political.
Yes, I know.
I'm saying this because he was trying to explain how to live the good life.
Yeah.
He's like, we can't just not do stuff.
Right.
You have to do things. And that's where it's like as a thin libertarian, I think that's just the very basic of how it explains the ways you shouldn't behave, how to live a good life, what you should do to be a good person. On top of that, you need something else. But the problem is for Peterson in here is that he's jumping between political ideas.
Yeah. I noticed that too.
Not unpolitical ideas randomly all the time. And so it creates
it confuses
confusion.
it. Yeah, it confuses the whole thing.
Sorry, my computer just fell asleep, so I can't see my notes. Oh. But we can go on to the next one. Oh, we're back.
All right, number 3. Hierarchies of competence are desirable and should be promoted.
Yeah, I had absolutely no problem with anything he said here. He was just saying that, like, talking about, if you deserve something, there should be no reason why you should be looked down upon for getting it. And that different people have different skills, and, you are better at football than me, so you should make the football team, and I shouldn't. It's really simple. I don't think we're going to...
Yeah, I mean, we're talking like essentially division of labor. Like, just because you're not paid as much as someone doesn't mean you're not of value to society.
Right. And I would argue that the division of labor is what creates the productive society and respect for property rights. Once you have the respect for property rights, once you start dividing labor well, that is where the wealth comes from, which I think from what Peterson was saying throughout this, I don't know that, he says something different. I don't think he disagrees with the division of labor, but he clearly doesn't based on what he was saying, but he puts other things ahead of it, I think.
Yeah. No, I think, basically what he talked about was if there's a market, I don't know if he said these words exactly, but the best will probably rise to the top. Mm-hmm. And we should want that. We want geniuses to have lots of money so they can create stuff that we can all use.
Yep, he did say that.
And he says that happens I think he said that happens in our society or something. He didn't necessarily say in a free market, but but he says that should be desirable, and I don't disagree with him there.
Sure.
All right, we want to move on to number 4? Because this was the one I think I had the biggest problem with, but not entirely. He wasn't when he first started, he didn't finish as bad as I thought he was going to be.
Yeah.
But I'll read it. Borders are reasonable. Likewise, limits on immigration are reasonable. Furthermore, it should not be assumed that citizens of societies that have not evolved functional individual rights, predicated polities, will hold values in keeping with such polities. Am I saying that word right? Polities?
I guess.
So what he was saying there was, first, I really, this just bothers me when people do this. When they talk about borders, and we all know what everyone means when they talk about borders, and he starts talking about property rights and your property and borders around your laptop and a door to your house and walls to your rooms, and he conflates property borders with state borders.
Yeah, explicitly.
Yeah, and it's pretty bad, but I think it's a way, maybe it's a tactic, because there's no way. Like we said, they can't really believe that's what people mean by no borders. So it's kind of a way to, you're talking to conservatives and we'll do something obvious that you'll all agree. I mean, you're talking to conservatives, they generally like the state borders anyway.
Right.
But he kind of like makes almost a joke out of it by talking about there's no borders around my laptop, so you can just take it because you want it because there's no borders. Like, that's absurd.
Well, the frustrating thing, or the ironic thing is that he's talking about we have borders so that your laptop doesn't get stolen.
Right.
Well, the political borders are there so that they can say who they can steal from a lot. Like, we're not talking about little tiny theft. I would much rather someone stole my laptop
than the amount of income they take every year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could buy my laptop many times over.
Right. What's interesting about your borders is the people who steal from me don't steal from people on the other side of the border.
Yeah.
At least not directly.
Yeah. So he does come and you know, he makes it explicit that, you know, he's not against all immigration, and he says that a lot of entrepreneurs come from
India, was specifically,
right.
I think, and he talked about them earning money and sending it back, and that's a good thing.
Right. Oh, yeah. And that's a point that a lot of the libertarians miss.
Yeah.
With the even people who are okay with you know, the government not controlling the borders, is that remittance matters a lot, and it really, I mean, they really can send a lot of money back, and it really makes it less necessary, quote unquote, less necessary in the government's eyes to send aid to those countries.
Right.
So you can actually save. The government will spend less maybe if they actually let more people in. So yeah, he's not.
Yeah. So I mean, of course, there's obvious. I mean, anyone who's been on our website or has listened to us knows our thoughts on government-controlled immigration. His points weren't as terrible as I thought they were going to be, and he did say some things that you don't generally hear from the border people.
Sure.
Them sending money back. So
he's a reasonable guy.
Right.
But I think he's just naive, like he said a few times, and about other issues. He said, well, that's where we leave it up to political dialogue.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, but that's how we got to where we are right now.
Right. Exactly.
That's I'll kind of wrap that a bow around that point a little bit later on, so we get through everything. But I think it's kind of telling about some things. He also says towards the end of it, if a company makes you go through, if your employer makes you go through diversity training, you have to stand up and say, I will not do that, and make a big deal about it. And so we had a diversity training where I work, and it was actually like pretty good. They brought in the panel from people in various businesses talking about dealing with a diverse workplace, and from major companies, like big time companies. And the message they were bringing was just basically use good basic management practices, and that's what you need. And also, someone raised their hand and asked about the gender income inequality, and one of the panelists, who was a woman, shot right back and said, like, don't believe the media. There's no gender income inequality, like they're saying. They're comparing apples to oranges. So that's completely anecdotal on my part.
I was going to say, I doubt he would be referring to a training like that.
Right, but at the same time, if I went in with that attitude, like if Jordan Peterson said that to me, like, refuse to do it, blah, and believe me, I went into that seminar, with my hands across my chest going like, this is going to be terrible. But if I went in and if I went up to like my manager and said like, I'm not going to, this is ridiculous. Like that would have ended up reflecting really poorly on me because, well, one, I would have had a lot of egg in my face when it turned out to be not bad, but just not saying that I would think that because I hear a lot of people going through diversity training and it's not good what they go through. So,
yeah, and I don't think it's, I mean, I get what you're saying, for sure. But I do think that maybe companies or definitely certain people feel pressure to,
yes.
What's the word?
Conform.
Yeah, conform to this kind of.
Yeah, I'm not saying that you shouldn't figure out a way to fight back or anything. My suggestion to what Jordan Peterson was saying there was, I mean, people know their companies, and they probably will have a good idea if they know something's coming down the road and they know it's going to be bad. Like I'll defer that to the individual employee to figure that out, but I would just say you might be surprised every once in a while. So just take a step back and maybe listen to it first. And I it's a tough.
Will say too, I mean, he's the free speech guy, and I'm all for listening to anyone's opinion, no matter how bad it is. Listening to something,
right?
Make sure you equip yourself, or try to find out what you believe is correct or what is correct, and be able to defend your position.
Yeah,
without being angry.
Yeah, so I would say maybe what I would do is listen to what they have to say, and if you disagree with it,
tell them you disagree.
Right. Instead of, because that's what you don't want to, I mean, we're all told that, conservatives are told, and libertarians, that we're so closed-minded and everything. Well, that doesn't help the case very much.
Right.
Even if 9 times out of 10, it is going to be something ridiculous.
Right.
But the point is, for those one-off cases, you could end up looking like an idiot and not good if you jump the gun. So,
moving on?
Yep.
Do you want me to combine these next two?
Yes, because he didn't. I'm disappointed. I don't think he explicitly talked about number 6, or at least the one word that
he did.
I had a problem.
He did.
Oh, he did?
I listened for it. All right, so I'll just combine them anyway.
Yeah.
So number 5, people should be paid so that they are able and willing to perform socially useful and desirable duties. 6, citizens have the inalienable right to benefit from the result of their own honest labor. He did mention that word. He didn't harp on it. And that's why obviously the word we're talking about is citizens, which I think that's what you're referring to. Okay, so he said that, but then he didn't distinguish, like, these people live in this country and they deserve it, and the people who don't deserve it. He didn't make that distinction at all, which makes me think that when he says that, he means people living in society. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but he didn't stress the word citizen. He just talked about people make things, they should be able to keep it.
Right. Well, it doesn't make sense, like, based on everything else he was saying, for him to say citizen and to mean like, oh, well, you only have that right if you have the status of citizen.
Had the paperwork in and passed the test and stayed here for 6 years and whatever. Like, and he did say the word because, and I just re-listened to this because I wanted to catch it because I didn't hear it the first time. And then that was it. He just said it and then talked about people being able to keep what they earn. Yeah.
So I think that's just him not being a libertarian.
Right. And not knowing the word might be a problem for some people like us.
Could you say that it triggered us?
It triggered us. So we went to our safe space and then came out and we were okay.
Yeah. Well, this podcast is basically our safe space.
It really is. It's I don't know where I'm going with this. It's just a safe space.
You know where my other safe space is?
I don't know.
On my tractor.
Oh. I was hoping to be a tractor and not something we didn't want to hear about.
I'm not even going to touch that. But otherwise, for points 5 and 6, I completely agreed with him.
Yeah, same.
He talked about how there's some really rich people out there, and like the Elon Musks, the Steve Jobs, the Bill Gates, and they put their wealth to. And I know,
Yeah, I know.
we don't need people actually, but they've created.
We do welcome those comments, so send them our way.
I mean, we welcome any comments, but no, they do create with their wealth, even though it's tainted with the state in some ways. There are people out there, and maybe those aren't the best examples because of the crony capitalism that exists, but there are people out there throughout history and today who produce a lot of good
and we couldn't do our podcast without them.
Right. So they do
or someone else who did it. Whoever did it, they were the ones who happened to do it, so they earned that money.
Right. And you don't even have to talk about the mega rich people. You talk about someone owning a business and someone who maybe has some moderate amount of wealth, and he's able to
employ 5 people and,
right.
Provide services for people in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. That's.
I mean, he didn't even touch. I don't think he even said we do need to pay a portion to the government. I don't even think he said that.
Right.
He just said people should earn.
Well, that's probably.
This might be implicit in his stance, but he didn't. He still didn't say it. I mean, he also didn't say taxation is theft.
Right.
But he didn't even make a point we can't be too greedy. The government needs some of our. He didn't throw one of those disclaimers out. He just said people should keep what they earn.
Right. But even a lot of, I mean, I don't want to criticize.
I'm not being too, I'm not being, I also don't, I know he's not an anarchist. He explicitly said he's not an anarchist, so he's not against government. Right. So it's implicit in what he's saying, but he still didn't feel a need to harp on that.
Yeah, I guess he's talking more about taxes that are meant to be punitive.
Right.
But yeah, I mean,
whatever. It was good.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to criticize him because he didn't say taxation is theft.
Exactly.
Baby steps here.
Right. We get them listening to Peterson, then we'll get our crummy ideas on them, and they'll be
and then we'll send them to the Friends Against Government podcast and just completely ruin them,
trash them. Their mind will go to mush.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else to add to that one?
Nope.
All right. Number 7. It is more noble to teach young people about responsibilities than about rights.
So, this is where I get frustrated with them.
Yeah.
Because rights are extremely important.
They are. Okay, go ahead.
And I agree with him about talking about responsibility. I think it's understated in a lot of society today. There's not much accountability at all left. And it's frustrating to see because that's why the government starts trying to do so much.
Do whatever it wants.
Right. It's because people just don't want to be accountable. It's like people that go on government disability. And I've heard, plenty of, very strongly conservative people say, well, that's what it's there for. If you hit hard times, they don't feel shame about that. It's like, well, there's disability insurance. And
I know where you can get some.
Yeah. So maybe, there's things that are there that if you took care of yourself, if you took responsibility for yourself, then you wouldn't have to go on the dole like that.
Yeah.
But that's kind of beside the point of the issue that I had with rights, because he was talking about these, and maybe that's, I don't know. This is why it's confusing.
Yeah.
Because he jumps between what he's talking about a lot.
Yeah.
Because he was referring to these extra rights the left are trying to bring. Well, of course, I mean, those aren't rights though.
Well, this is what I think he's doing. Again, he's not a political philosopher, so he's not thinking in those terms of how important rights are. He's thinking of individuals, and he's sat in his office for 30 plus years talking to people with all kinds of imaginable problems. And how many times do you think he's had someone come in his office and having problems with his wife or something, or her husband, and says, "Well, it's my right to do that," and he says, "Yeah, but you got to be responsible. Like, you have a family, you got to put your responsibilities ahead of your rights." And so, as him being a clinical psychologist, I think that's where he's coming from with the rights versus responsibilities on like an individual level. Like, yeah, you have a right to do that, but is it going to be beneficial to you? Whereas for a political philosophy, hell yeah, rights are important.
Right.
Like, we don't want the government infringing on any of our rights, and we'll let the market or the society that you live in decide what is acceptable behavior or responsible behavior or whatever. So I was thinking that as I was listening to it, and I could be wrong.
Well, no,
but that's kind of how I interpreted what he's saying.
That's probably what he meant, but that's kind of the danger.
It's confusing, for sure.
It's the danger might not be the right word for it, but that's kind of the danger of using him as a political philosopher as well, as because he's got these blind spots. And there's probably an example of one of these blind spots where you have it in your head. I mean, we're talking about conservatives, and what is one thing that conservatives really love?
Second Amendment rights, right? You know?
Well, no, not even that. But what's something that conservatives tend to really love, or a group of people that conservatives really love?
I don't know.
The police.
Certainly.
So, if someone hears that, like, we can't worry about rights so much. Got to worry about responsibility, blah, blah, blah.
And they'll say, well, follow the law. And
right.
then you won't go to jail. If you don't smoke pot, you don't go to jail.
And so when they're presented with people who, when confronted with the police, talk about rights, it's going to be in the back of their heads, well, no, look at these babies screaming about rights when they should have not broken the law and been responsible.
Yeah, right. True. So totally agree.
That's the problem. I don't like it. It's not the problem with what he necessarily said. It's how people are bound to take that, or at least a lot of his audience is bound to take that.
And for all I know, if he was on this podcast, he might say, "No, I was talking about the government."
Right?
But I kind of I'm trying to think from his point of view, being that he usually deals with individual people. And I could see even like a libertarian being like, well, I can, use whatever I want to use. And he's saying, yeah, sure, that's your right to do that, but it's destroying your family, you know?
Sure.
So that's why I think that's what he's saying. But I completely agree that message probably gets lost when you're talking to just about anybody,
right? Unless
it's a one-on-one conversation.
Speaking of coming on the podcast, I mean, we've had someone of his stature come on.
Yeah.
And speaking of that too, he's very critical. Jordan Peterson is very critical of the postmodernists throughout this. And it's funny because, like, my exposure to postmodernism is through Thaddeus Russell.
Same.
And even though there's a lot of stuff I disagree with Thaddeus Russell on,
I like a lot of it.
Right? No, I don't mean a lot. I mean, there are things.
Well, there's plenty.
I misspoke. There's plenty that I disagree with him on, like, fundamentals. Whereas it's kind of ironic that Jordan Peterson, a lot of like fundamental ideas, I might be a little bit more in line with him. Maybe not fundamental ideas, but the conclusions of Thaddeus Russell, I basically agree with everything.
His conclusions, yes.
So it's kind of interesting, like how that
is funny,
how that plays out.
Right.
So I don't know. It's postmodernism. I think it means something that kind of like libertarianism.
I'll loosely quote Thaddeus Russell and say there is no right interpretation of anything. There's a million interpretations of it. So, Thaddeus Russell can argue his interpretation, but even by his language, the other people are correct in their interpretation as well. So, is Jordan Peterson wrong for criticizing what most people, which I even think Thaddeus Russell would agree is the common interpretation of postmodernism, which is, I don't know, all these loonies. I like Russell's interpretation of it, and that's what I go to.
Right.
And that's when I talk to people who think they like postmodernism and can kind of quote Thaddeus Russell. I think it's kind of funny to see the reaction. But even Thaddeus Russell says there's multiple interpretations of anything.
Yep. Yeah, and that was kind of...
We don't have odds that any of these people read postmodernism is low.
Yeah, we don't have to go worry about, because
that
was kind of a throwaway line on my part to bring up Thaddeus Russell.
Yeah. Did you? This is going to take us off the rails a little bit, but we won't. Did you listen to the School Sucks podcast recently with Thaddeus Russell? I just
No.
talk on integrity. Maybe we should have an episode on that.
Okay.
Just throwing that out there. All right, what number are we on? 7? No, 8. Or did you add anything to add to 7?
No.
Responsibilities and rights.
Yep. And also, yeah. No. Go ahead.
All right,
Good for
number 8.
Yep.
It is better to do what everyone has always done, unless you have some extraordinary valid reason to do otherwise. Did he?
It's
touch
a
on
little
this?
bit, a little bit. But it's funny. I was tweeting about these 12 points on Twitter the other day, and someone said, "Wow, that's a terrible idea." Another libertarian. I was like, "Well, actually, I agree with that one. I don't have a problem with that." And that's where I kind of stopped you earlier when you brought up Michael Huemer, and I wrote my notes were what says, "This is Michael Huemer's point as well."
Right.
And that is, to put it another way, because that's kind of an aggressive way to phrase it, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think extraordinarily is a word that it's how forceful that word's supposed to be is often exaggerated, I think. So, not saying that Peterson was doing that. So all he's saying is that if you want to come around, if people have been doing something forever,
it's probably
good, and it's basically working. Yeah, it's the burden of proof is on you to disprove them.
Yeah.
So we're anarchists. We say that the state shouldn't exist. The state's been around forever. So yeah, the burden of proof is on us to show that it's wrong. And I think we have very good reasons that very easily show it to be wrong. But yeah, the burden of proof is on us.
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't mean that that doesn't make it unfair.
Right. I mean, it's perfectly acceptable for your run-of-the-mill status to be like, when we say, "Nah, I don't want a state," for them to question that and not be like, "Oh yeah, interesting point." Like,
well, how chaotic would the world be if people didn't use that principle?
Like, you can't learn from the past; you just have to go on and do what you want, or something.
Or just that we just change whatever we do on a whim.
Yeah.
That there's no structure to anything. It would be terrible.
There has to be some expectation. You have to kind of know what's coming.
Right.
Like, if tomorrow we changed from a normal conversation, now people just punch each other in the face, like, that would be chaos.
Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good one. Number 9?
Yes.
Radical change should be viewed with suspicion, particularly in a time of radical change. This kind of goes in with number 8.
Yeah, did he really explicitly talk about that? Might have been another one I was zoned out.
He mentioned, maybe it was wrapped into number 8, but whenever people are, it's okay to be suspicious of radical change.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I remember. I kind of remember that now.
Yeah.
I think that's the same
like,
thing.
If someone,
we could have wrapped that up with 9.
Yeah, we'll just wrap that in. It's basically the same thing. Like, if things are going one way for a long time and now someone's suggesting something radically different, it's good to question it.
Mm-hmm.
Which I mean, that's why we do this podcast.
I mean, it's good to question everything.
Yeah, and we're talking about radical ideas here.
I mean, I think that's a sign of maturity, is to be able to question something and be open and intellectually honest about the answers you come up with.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people think that when you question something that you're already decided that it's wrong, and you shouldn't do that.
No, and you should question everything.
You should make a hypothesis and then try to break it.
Right.
So, all right, number 10.
The government, local and distal, should leave people to their own devices as much as possible.
So, I'm going to read my notes for this, because I took copious notes because I wanted to get my point across correctly here.
Let's hear it.
I wrote, fine.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's possible is they should go away and never do anything. So
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good with it.
Yeah. Moving on to number 11.
Number 11. Intact heterosexual 2-parent families constitute the necessary bedrock for a stable polity.
I mean, I think having two parents is important. I think the heterosexual arrangement tends to be pretty good too. That said, I mean, I'm not trying to force anyone to do anything.
Right.
So,
I kind of say the same. I mean, I agree. I think statistics will probably prove that, that having a stable two-parent home is better for people, or generally, I mean, how do you define better? I don't know. Generally, I think that's correct. It doesn't mean there's not outliers. It doesn't mean that it can't be done any other way.
Right. Or that you should force people to do it.
Or you should force people to do it. That's kind of what I think.
So what the point I wanted to bring up here was going back to that article that we mentioned earlier, was that the one thing that was going around libertarian circles was that, and there's not much context around it with what he was saying because it's not all direct quotes, but he mentioned enforced monogamy in that article.
Oh yeah, I meant to, yeah.
And he did, when he was talking about this point, he did say, you know, the heterosexual two-parent family, I mean, that's the best arrangement, that's good. He goes, it doesn't mean we shouldn't be tolerant of other familial arrangements. So there, at least 11 months ago or so, it didn't seem like he was saying that there should be, you know, force involved with your arrangements, but I don't know what you would mean by enforced.
I don't know. I don't have the context of that quote, so I don't know. Through the state, yeah, you know what my answer is.
Right, but I just don't. It's kind of an odd, and he might have just been talking. I mean, I don't know. There's been like several times in this podcast episode where I've been like, maybe that's not the best word to say. He's probably a little bit better of a speaker than I am to not say that.
Yeah.
Did they say something?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's weird. It's
who knows?
I don't know how to.
I don't know.
I don't know how to put that. How to take that in anything but a bad way. But
yeah,
it would be a major contradiction and pretty radical. I mean, with the one recent shooting where they found out that the shooter was involuntarily celibate, and people from the left started talking about, well, maybe we need the state to force relationships or redistribute sex or something. Like it's absolutely insane. So it would be not exactly
just as insane as redistributing your other property,
right?
Which they do that and have no problem with that.
But it just would blow my mind to think that Peterson would agree with anything related to that.
Yeah.
And not saying that enforced monogamy does not mean like, hey, these guys who aren't good with the girls, you girls have to, go be with them. I don't think he's saying that.
I certainly don't think he was saying that.
I think enforced. I'm just trying to be clear because I didn't make it clear.
Yeah.
I guess enforced.
I mean, maybe he was, but I can't imagine.
I don't think so.
Say something like that.
I would think enforced monogamy would just be that.
As a society, we kind of. I don't know. I don't even know what that means.
It's a question, and it would, hopefully he clears that up because
maybe yes. I don't know.
A lot of libertarians took a lot of umbrage with those two words, and it would be unfortunate if he just misspoke.
Which is a possibility. Should we move on to the last one?
Sure.
Number 12. We should judge our political system in comparison to other actual political systems and not to hypothetical utopias. I
think that the first part of that is fine, and the second part is another one of those. Well,
I would say define utopia.
Right. He did say he was talking about these left-wing utopias, and he did say, and then he did
about forcing things on people.
Right, but then he did mention radical right utopias are bad, but I don't know what radical right utopia. He's probably referring to fascism.
And what kept sticking in my mind there was, see, this is why I should have taken notes and I didn't, because I was going to say, I guess I don't have a problem with him because he talked about forcing it on people.
Yes, he did explicitly come back with that and say, enforcing your views. But most people call libertarianism, especially anarchy, they refer to it as a utopian idea.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that he would consider anarchism, the way we talk about it, as a utopian idea, especially based on that last episode we covered talking about. So it's
I don't want to let, I was thinking that, I don't want to let him off the hook, but if I really take his words, he said he doesn't want to force it on anyone. Well, that's what if you want to call it a utopian idea,
right,
is not forcing it. Whereas a piece of paper, a constitution that lays your rights out and is somehow going to protect them and keep politicians with ultimate power in check is very utopian to me.
Yes.
And doesn't work.
Yeah.
Where we don't want to force anything on anyone.
Yeah, so I think it's fair to take what he said previously in the what's his name interview. The one we covered, the episode that we covered.
Was that when he was who was he talking to?
The classical liberal guy. Man, I forget his name already. Or not already. It's not important.
I forget his
name.
But
I think it's fair that when we're talking about what he's referring to as a utopia, that he would be referring to anarchy based on things he said in the past. That he spent a decent amount of time talking about.
Right.
So I do think it's fine to judge things based on not even ideal situations, because anarchy is not we're not claiming it's going to be utopia. We're claiming that there's not going to be any sorts of problems, but at least against something that we don't have or haven't had, although there's been instances of anarchy to some degree throughout history. So you actually can, judge it in comparison to it. But I mean, that's no one ever likes those answers. But I don't think it's a problem to say, here's the ideologically pure thing that we want, and we judge it based on that, because you're not there. Right. Because I don't think Peterson would say that whatever political arrangement he wants will be perfect, obviously, because he's talking about utopias. So there's always something to get better at.
Right. And maybe a lot of people would just flip the switch and end the state, which, maybe. But what if we did that and just got rid of the government, another one would just replace it.
Right.
So there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and I don't want what we just said, to all get lost with his first point to get lost in that. Because I think it is still good to compare actual political systems, because living in the United States
is much better than living in a lot of other places.
Right. Like the Soviet Union, the United States has its problems, and there are some really evil people.
Major ones.
That are in control of things. But it is incomparable to living in the Soviet Union. Or, other places currently and throughout history. So
right, and it's like, say every morning you wake up and get kicked in the nuts and it really hurts. And then, somehow changes happen and now you get kicked in the shin. And you're telling people, well, I used to get kicked in the nuts, which is, really bad. But getting kicked in the shin is better, and I would prefer that.
Right.
But it doesn't mean it's ideal. Doesn't mean I shouldn't work to stop being kicked in the shin every morning.
Well, if you could say that if you could figure out that, let's say that the United States is the best country in the world, then what do you have? What does that mean? There's nothing else to get better?
No way to get better.
Right. Now, clearly Peterson wouldn't say that. But again, that's where he's out of his element.
Right.
That he's not thinking it through this way.
Right. And, better for who? Certainly not better for Iraqis.
Right.
I mean, it's pretty good for us. We got lots of stuff.
Yep.
Our lives are very easy compared with 99.9% of the people who've ever been on this planet.
Yeah. It's probably more than that.
Yeah. But if I lived in Iraq, I might not think the United States is so great.
Exactly. So, overall, I think Peterson's pretty good.
Yeah, he's pretty good. And
for when he's in his wheelhouse, he's excellent.
Yeah. And yeah, it's like I'm not saying he's the greatest guy in the world.
Right.
I'm not saying, and we clearly have our disagreements, but I think generally he's good.
Mm-hmm. So here's my thing, because people might get upset that, like, oh, why are you going after him? You should be going after the crazies, like the leftists and the, everyone else who are really trying to institute bad policies. If we had it his way, it would be better. I'm sure it would be, like without a doubt. But the problem is we did kind of have it his way at some point, and we have what we have now. So the problem is he's just rolling it back. I think he's just kind of wants to roll it back to something. But that doesn't take us, I don't know that takes us off the same path.
Yeah.
It's tough to say.
I know what you're saying. I know. Yeah. I mean, you're, and like the certain points that you made in this episode about talking about responsibility over your individual rights and saying that message getting confused. I think it's important to point that out.
Right. So that's why we do these.
Yeah.
At least I think it's important to cover this kind of stuff.
Definitely.
And this is why I went through, I don't know, maybe about a year or so where basically everything I wrote was critical of other libertarians. Because I think that while, they're probably right on 99% of things, that like little stuff, I think it's important to keep the message and the ideas behind what we're arguing for correct. That we're against coercion. That even if we think that we can manage the state, we can't, because that's the fundamental problem with the state. It is unmanageable. Right.
Right.
That we shouldn't fall prey to thinking that, we can control. It's like the Lord of the Rings. It's like everyone thinks that, I can bear the burden of carrying the ring or running the government. No, you can't.
Correct.
So that's why I think it's good to reinforce these ideas. Even if someone's pretty good, you have to acknowledge the difference. Because Peterson, and he wouldn't put himself in our camp anyway.
No.
But people see, and that's what I mean. And I'm not saying that Jordan Peterson. I think Jordan Peterson is pretty well entrenched. Again, I'm going to say it again. That might not be the best word, but I think he's secure. Also, he's secure in what his beliefs are. I don't think that throughout this that he's going to make radical changes in what he believes because the left is pressuring him. I think he knows what he believes, and that's what he's doing.
Yeah, I think he's learning it through this whole journey,
I don't mean to say that he's not going to have some changes in his views, because you should. I mean, if you never change your views, I think that's very suspicious.
He's not
right.
He's not like a.
But I'm saying it's not going to be like a fundamental thing, like we saw before a couple of years ago with the rise of libertarians who just became anti-leftists and then became authoritarians themselves.
Right.
I'm saying that I don't think that's going to happen with Peterson.
No, right.
But I think someone like him could be a catalyst for other people to do that. Like we're saying, like I said earlier with the police. So, and that's clearly not his goal. It's just a warning to be like, he says good stuff, but he says good stuff when it's in his wheelhouse.
Yeah, when it's like personal advice.
Right. When he's outside of that, be careful what you're taking is like some sort of gospel.
Yeah, and just another thing to add on Jordan Peterson, I think it's unfortunate he gets linked with the alt-right.
Oh, he's not alt-right at all.
No, I think he'd be strongly against the alt-right, and he may have explicitly said that before. But I do think they are attracted to him because of the messages he gives about being responsible.
Right, and just pushing back against the left.
Yes, and people are. I mean, young men, certainly. I think Jordan Peterson is right on. They're looking for something to live for, to tell them it's okay to be a guy. It's okay to be a man. I think there's a lot of mixed signals out there in the world, and he gives them, it's okay to stand up and say what you think and take responsibility for your actions and your life. And I think those are good messages.
Yeah.
So come at me, Bird.
Yeah. So again, I don't want it to people to think that I'm saying that he's a bad influence. I'm just saying that there's potential for people to misunderstand misinterpret
totally agree.
what he's saying.
And we purposely, by the way, didn't talk about what we were going. We knew what video we were going to be talking about, but we didn't have really any discussion before this because I wasn't sure where you were going to go with it, and I thought we did all right.
Yeah, I agree. So,
yeah, do you have a free market story?
Yeah, we just passed an hour, so
let's move along.
So we've been kind of giving some shout outs to some podcasts that are in our like little Twitter group of anarchists.
Friends Against Government, Peaceful Treason, Free Man Beyond the Wall.
Jeremiah.
I heard the million things he does.
15. Which, by the way, happy birthday, Jeremiah.
Yeah.
He turned...
We got to get him back on now that you got your article out.
I know. He turned an age that is way too young for...
The amount of stuff he does?
Yes, and for the amount that he knows.
Yeah.
So...
man's a freak.
Yeah, putting me to shame. But check out, he asked as a birthday present to go check out his Patreon page, and you can give as little as $1 per month. So I recommend going and doing that. We'll be linked to him and all the other podcasts that we just talked about on the show notes page. But we didn't give our free market success story yet.
Oh, let's get on it.
That was kind of like the intro of it. But how neat is it that you can create a podcast for free? Now, I bought some equipment to make it better, but really, if everyone already has a computer, I mean, you can do it just with the phone. Mm-hmm. People already have these tools available to them. We all have internet connections, and so you can make a podcast and deliver it out to the rest of the world, and they can all get the podcast for free too, with equipment and services that they already have. That's amazing.
That people got very wealthy off of.
Right. Oh, yeah, and you can make a lot of money off it, too. I mean, back in the day, and not even that long ago, if you wanted, like, a program like this, that you would have to go to, like, public access and go through that. You have your, like, little public access show on TV. So it's just...
quality and nobody watched.
Right. Although a great movie came out about it, UHF, Weird Al Yankovic.
Yeah, Weird Al. That's what I thought you were talking about.
Yeah. It's a great flick.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah. But it's a neat thing that we just take for granted. I mean, we do this, come and do this every Monday. We don't think about, all the technology that had to happen, all of the advancements and the breakthroughs that went on to make this happen. And even a couple of years ago, it would have been possible, but a lot more difficult. I mean, it's so easy nowadays. So, thank you to the invisible hand.
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you to everyone for listening. And hey, we got a lot of good, part of the market is we get to meet a lot of great people and be on other shows, and they come on our shows, and it's a lot of fun.
But yeah, I wanted to bring up, when you brought up that non-aggression principle piece, when we had Jeremiah on our podcast many episodes
What episode
ago,
was it?
Like maybe 30-something.
Oh, 30-something. So
I think it was over
50-something.
I thought maybe 50. Oh, you know what? I don't know. It was about a year ago, though, I think.
Yeah, it was a while.
And I brought up that I didn't think the non-aggression principle was axiomatic. And Jeremiah disagreed, and we talked about it for a little bit. And then I said, well, you know what?
It's on. We're debating.
Let's not cover it here, but let's do a written debate, and I'll start it. And it only took me till now to finally... Yeah. So, Jeremiah, you're on the clock. If you don't have it within like 2 days, come on, man. No, I'm just kidding.
I was going to say, Jeremiah's probably thinking like, wait, what are you talking about? What debate? What?
It took me forever to do it, but it's there. So go check that out on McFlugel.com too. It's I think it's kind of interesting. It's kind of it's really inside baseball.
It's good discussion,
and it's getting it's if you're a nerdy libertarian, then it should be right up your alley.
Yeah,
and I'd love feedback on it because it could be not controversial that people would get upset over it, but controversial in the sense that I think that a lot of people disagree. So I'd love to get some feedback on that.
Check it out.
Yep. So also check out show notes page, mcflugel.com/92. We'll link to Jordan Peterson's speech that he gave in there. And we'll have links to guys we talked about, Friends Against Government podcast, Free Man Beyond the Wall, Jeremiah stuff, Peaceful Treason, and libertymugs.com, and sign up on our email list at mcflugel.com to get a discount off your first purchase of mugs at libertymugs.com. Also, you'll find ways to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. I think we're on basically all the podcast grabbers.
Yeah.
That's another thing. I only did stuff for iTunes and Stitcher, and there's just other podcast services that just automatically find it and put it on theirs. So, that's pretty cool. Didn't have to do anything for that.
Didn't have to do anything. It
So
just showed up.
you got a bonus free market success story there, I guess.
Yeah.
And Twitter and Facebook. Find us there. So with that, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next week. Next week, if all goes well, we'll have a guest. Talk about something pretty fun. With a fun guest.
Yeah, man. Yeah. A fun guy.
Yep.
All right. Peace.
Later.